Hi folks, welcome to our video series for Chapter 9 on evaluating the market. In this series we're going to look at some of the considerations in understanding the labor market, where we can get compensation data to validate whether or not we're paying certain job classifications fairly and equitably, look at the steps for conducting a compensation survey, and analyzing some results from that survey. So let's begin. You start off here with a slide that talks about some average weekly earnings of workers in a wide variety of different industries. And what you can see is that there are certain industries like mining, oil, and gas that pay quite a bit more than accommodation, food, beverage, service workers, and even retail. A lot of that is a matter of supply and demand and the specialty that's involved in working in those areas, some special skills and those kinds of things. So that would make a difference in how much companies are prepared to pay these workers in those organizations. The other thing you have to consider is where they are. So oil and gas may be bigger in Alberta or even out in the East Coast, right? So we might find, because that's one of the top that's one of the top wage earners, that a lot of salaries may be higher there. And so too may the cost of living in some places. So it really does depend on what you do and where you do it, and that has an impact on how much you're going to get paid. So now if you look here, we have a little introduction that talks about some of our good friends in hockey. And back, if you go down to the third bullet here, there was a lockout way back in the early 2000s, 2004 and 5. But hockey players' salaries rose as a result of that by 2007-8 to the pre-2004 levels. So they rose even above that. And again, in 2012-13, the NHL owners decided that they were going to try and cut their pay and lock them out. And again, their pay rose again. Even since that time, as they're negotiating salaries. So what we tend to find is that depending on not just supply and demand, but really what it's going to take to increase the number of people that are going to watch games, what it's going to take to get top-notch talent, it's really a player's market. And that's what the owners had to realize. There's only so much that they can cut before it actually gets back to the pre-lockout levels. So if we look at understanding the labor market, we have to look at how easy is it to get labor, and how and what supply is it in. So is there a demand for labor, or is there supply of labor? So for example, if we're demanding people to work in our organization, maybe certain types of engineers, skilled workers, whatever they might be, then certainly if they're in short supply, we're going to have to pay more. Right? So labor supply will impact that. What province are you working in? Some provinces like Alberta have a higher cost of living than in Ontario, and of course it's going to cost more to live in Alberta. Men versus women. We still do tend to see from time to time that there is a difference. Women don't always get the same access to certain jobs that men have because maybe they haven't had access to the same levels of training. We find that sometimes they haven't had enough time on the job to get the same level of pay as men. And again, some women balancing work and family just don't have a desire to some extent to reach some of the levels in industry that men reach. That's not always the case, but sometimes it is. You have to make a decision when it comes to balance. So sometimes there aren't as many women available to do jobs that men have traditionally done. We also find too, we have to look a little bit at the labor market within which you operate and the optics of which you pay. So if you look at the Prime Minister of Canada, you can see the Prime Minister earns significantly less than people who are working in sports. So the idea is, don't forget, the Prime Minister, it's a public position, right? So again, you don't want to have it seen that he's earning like $3-4 million a year, right? That wouldn't be right when you look at the fact that taxpayers are really paying for it. So you have to really think a little bit about how much you would be prepared to pay that job, given that the taxpayers aren't as wealthy as they used to be, don't have the same kind of disposable income to pay a higher salary than what this is. So optics wise, you have to be careful. Now, we also want to look at the concept of a compensating differential to determine how much it influences how much we pay. Sometimes a higher level of compensation has to be offered by an employer because of some undesirable aspects of the job. Maybe the industry has a poor reputation, so industries like tobacco, not environmentally the best place you might want to look at. I mean, even steel now, a lot of people don't want to work in the steel industry. It's dirty. It's not environmentally hip or sexy, right? So who wants to work there? Even working conditions. Well, we have health and safety legislation to manage that for us. We still have some poor working conditions if you're in construction, working outside, in extreme heat, extreme cold, those kinds of things. A lot of employees might not want to work in those conditions. Even digging. Try and find somebody to dig ditches for you. It's a very tough thing to do. Landscapers have a hard time finding appropriate people, so it's not easy. We also look at seasonal employment. Some employers, if they only offer seasonal employment, they might have a hard time attracting people because people would want something full-time, a little more ongoing, and something that gives them a steadier paycheck throughout the entire year. We've also got cost of living, where the cost of living is higher, say in Alberta. You're going to have to pay more because people need to live there. So what a worker earns at Tim Hortons in Alberta would probably be very different from what they earn in Ontario. We also have to look at defining the relevant labor market. So where are we going to go to find comparators that we're going to compare what we pay to what other people pay? So if we look at this slide here, we're looking at some of the things that might help us define where we're going to not just help us define where we're going to get reasonable pay data from so that we can determine how much we should be paying particular jobs. So if you look here, one of the factors that help us define the relevant labor market is competitors in the same labor market. So sometimes labor is very specialized, so much so that certain jobs are found only within the same industry. So for example, if you're a chemical manufacturer and you need chemical process control engineers, you're not going to have to compete with an insurance company or an airline to hire them, right? So you have to look to see if there's competitors in your same labor market, not different ones, right? What if you've got competitors in the same product or service market? That's a little bit different, because sometimes you'll be competing for the same labor, right? So if you got the same products, you service the same markets, you might be looking for the same labor. You also have to look at occupational groupings. So in other words, with respect to occupational groupings, it depends what you're looking for. Sometimes if you're looking for an administrator, the market is usually local for that. So, because the skill set is generic. Similar if you're looking for HR professionals, accountants, clerical people, the market is usually local because it's a generic skill set that you're looking to hire from, right? So you can look at any labor market to get that level of skill, right? Or what you're looking for there, because they're probably in greater supply. But on the other hand, not every company, for example, is going to need a chemical process engineer, and those people might be very scarce, and they might be very scarce in some local labor markets. You might not be able to get them right in your labor market, so you're going to have to kind of go outside of your existing geographic area. All right, and then you've got, again, the geographic scope of the market, which is, again, what we've been alluding to. Which means, do I have to look locally? Do I have to look more internationally? Those kinds of things. I have a friend, he's a VP of HR out in the Guelph area, and he has he's a VP at a company that hires a lot of specialty engineers, and they used to go to India, and believe it or not, to get a lot of their engineers, and they used to be able to attract them with very nice compensation packages. And what they found, because they couldn't get the same level of skill and ability, it was a very specialized area. And what they found over time is that the Indian government got wise to what was going on, and they started offering better compensation packages to entice their homegrown talent to stay. So again, you always have to be in touch with what's going on in the marketplace to see whether or not you can afford to pay, and what you do need to pay in order to attract and retain that talent. Where to get compensation data? Loads of places. Most of it is third parties. Government agencies have surveys that they give you through StatsCan. Industrial groups. So, say for example, you work in maybe you're doing surveys with companies that are in your same labor market. So it could be, for example, you are in Hamilton, Ontario, and there are many companies that might want to be part of a salary survey group. Maybe get some healthcare organizations, Canada Revenue Agency perhaps, maybe some smaller or medium-sized private sector firms that are competing for the same labor. Maybe clerks, HR people, accountants, more of those generic jobs where the skills are in higher supply in that geographic area, just to make sure that for some of those benchmark jobs or those standard jobs that you'd all be competing for, you're paying within the same kind of area. And if you're not, it doesn't mean that you have to tell people what you're paying, but you might want to share thoughts on why you have to pay more or what's going on in your industry, so that companies have an idea of whether or not they might need to adjust what they pay. Compensation consultants are always a great source of information because they have many clients, probably many of them that are working in the same industry you are. So while they won't divulge the clients who may participate in the compensation survey that a consulting firm might do on your behalf, you can at least get an idea of what the compensation levels are in so many different areas, direct and indirect pay, including performance pay. And again, you can go to websites. They give you some information. Say, for example, you can go to monster.com, salary survey sites. There's all kinds of them, salaryexpert.com, different ones. And there's a list of them in your textbook that you can go to get some data. But part of the problem is you don't really know with some of these jobs if they're the exact same job that you're looking to price. You can also do in-house surveys, formal or informal. So sometimes what some employers do is they might do a compensation survey in-house. And they might ask their employees, maybe throw something up in SurveyMonkey to find out how happy they are with their pay, if they believe they're overpaid, underpaid, if they believe it's fair, just to get their impressions. Particularly important when it comes to employee benefits, to make sure that we're compensating people appropriately. The other thing you can do for informal surveys, in-house surveys that are a little more informal, is sometimes if you look at some of the want ads that are out there, they may give an idea of what they're prepared to pay. Sometimes even the government's websites, if you go to any of the Human Resources Development Canada websites through the federal government, they have job postings for people who are maybe not working, and for them to look at. So employers will actually post jobs there for free if they're looking for workers, and particularly if they're saying, hey, even somebody who's unemployed who might be collecting employment insurance might be looking at this job board. And those job boards are available online as well as in person. And again, it just gives you an idea of what other companies are paying. So there's a lot of options when it comes to in-house surveying. The other thing you can do is do a formal one and get a compensation consultant to actually do it for you, but then it becomes a little more of a third-party survey. But most organizations who do in-house surveys do try and do them themselves if they have the expertise. Now, what do you want to do when you're conducting a compensation survey? Well, make sure you know which jobs you want to survey, what information you want on them. Do you just want their base pay? Do you want their indirect pay? Do you want to know if they get performance pay? Do you want to know what their vacation plans are like? Anything. Identify which employers you want in your survey and determine how you're going to collect the data. So let's have a look. The first thing you want to make sure of, we said here, is make sure that you identify the jobs that are going to be surveyed and that there's a match. So you have to make sure that you have to, if you're going to survey a particular job like chemical engineers or administrative assistants, you want to make sure that they're doing things that are similar to what you would want them to do in your organization. So the job descriptions have to match, right? So usually when they're doing a survey, whether it's usually more the formal surveys that might be sent out, even if it's through a compensation consultant, you as somebody who's participating in the survey might need to first and foremost find out or identify, based on the job description and the title, or a small description, that summary we're talking about here, if that job's a match to yours. Because if that's the job that the company who ordered the survey wants to survey and you don't have it, it's not a good match, then you should just tick a box that says not a match and then just keep moving on. So again, and if there is a match, then keep going and answer the survey. Right? So when selecting the jobs that you're going to survey, it is important that you have a variety of job families and that you provide examples of the jobs with a brief description. Okay? So I'm going to stop the video here, and then what we're going to do for the next series of videos is we're going to look a little bit at some of the questions that you'd ask in a survey and how you might go about collecting compensation information.